Welcome back to Yoshi Entertainment, everybody. So, lately, a lot of people have been talking about what hit the news just recently, the Georgia shooting with the 14-year-old who shot up the school. Unfortunately, 4 people are deceased now, 2 teachers and 2 children. I believe there were 9 others that were injured. They still don't exactly know the extent to those injuries. Also, that his father was allegedly charged because he had something to do with supplying him, allegedly, with the guns that he used to shoot up the school. 14-year-old by the name of Colt Gray will allegedly be charged or tried as an adult, even though he's a child. And his father, like I said, Colin Gray, is also going behind bars. Now, this situation, it just reeks of negligence. It reeks of y'all really dropped the ball, and it's almost given that this was planned because there was so much that happened that should not have happened. We're going to start from the very beginning. Allegedly, that child was already on the radar of the freaking FBI because he had already been making some unhinged comments, I believe on social media, if I'm not mistaken, about wanting to shoot people allegedly. Allegedly, the FBI had to have a talk with him, and I'm trying to understand why this child wasn't picked up and put into a facility. And people will say, oh, well, they've tried that 1,000 times, and these people still end up the way that they do. Well, they still need to be put in a facility because at least it'll keep other people safe from them. Essentially, the authorities knew that this kid was a problem, and nothing was done. Like, I'm still trying to wrap my head around, y'all knew he was an issue. He was already making threats and showing that he could be a possible problem. Why wasn't something done? Once again, it's giving y'all dropped the ball on purpose. It's also giving them previous situations where there were kids literally going onto the internet talking about how they were going to shoot up a school, and basically nothing was done. No arrests were made. Like, the FBI, the authorities could find these people. They can find anybody else they want. They can find these kids and put a stop to what they're about to do. It was so bad that it seemed like one of these previous school shooters looked almost surprised in his mugshot and during the trial because he's trying to figure out, after everything he said on social media, why nobody got to him before he did what he did. This is what I'm talking about by it looks like the ball was dropped on purpose. Negligence. Nothing was done, and I'm trying to wrap my head around why. All the technology and the involvement, people watching people online. What was going on? What are the answers? Now, some of the children who had come in close contact with the shooter, they were interviewed. They were talking about the very close calls that they had, how some of them, one wrong move, if they had gotten up to go to the bathroom at the wrong time, would have been in the wrong place at the wrong time, unbeknownst to them, and would have gotten shot. Talking about how they were trying to barricade the doors to keep the kid from coming in there. It's really sad because no child should have to go through something like that. They should be safe at the schools without having to worry about who's coming down the hallway with an assault rifle to shoot them all up. It's not right. Now, the news did release the names of the victims. In this article, it first talks about a teacher by the name of Christina Araimi, which is the lady that you see, who's the second person in this picture, who unfortunately got shot trying to protect her students. She was, and I quote, a passionate teacher who treated her students like her own children, according to Gabrielle Booth, a relative of the late teacher, end quote. Allegedly, this woman was not able to have children. She wanted to. She was able to live out being essentially an extended mother to these children. She treated them like they were her own children. It says right here in this article that she, and I quote, struggled with infertility but would say it's okay because the students are my kids, Booth told CNN's Anderson Cooper, end quote. It also goes on to talk about how she wanted to celebrate her birthday not too long ago, but did not get the chance to do so because she was taking care of her mother, but then would celebrate with her children, but that was interrupted and stopped, never to happen because of this situation right here. And I quote, that's just who she was. She would spring into action. She died for her children like any good mom would do, like a good teacher would do. She couldn't have her own, so these were her kids, Booth said through tears. End quote. Once again, I believe people need to hear these. They need to hear these people talking about what happened to their loved ones during these situations because we cannot all keep our heads buried in the sand. It's all fun and games until it's your daughter, your sister, your brother, your son, your father, your mother, your grandparent. We all need to hear these situations because somewhere along the line, somebody's going to be triggered enough to do something, and somebody might have the ability or the power to do something about this. There was another young student by the name of Bree Jones who was telling her experience to the news outlets, saying that she was in class with the shooter. None of them knew he had the gun on him. He got up and he left the class. Then he came back, knocked on the door. She looked out the window. This is a summary, y'all. She said that her parents always taught her to do that. Look out the window before you open the door. She happened to look out that window, y'all, and if she would not, I shudder to wonder what would have happened to those students up in there. She noticed he had a gun and said, oh no, I can't let him back up in here. Even the teacher was like, okay, let the student back in now, young lady. And she said, we can't let him back in there because he has a gun, which the teacher didn't even know because she was at her desk the entire time, allegedly, according to this young girl. Unfortunately, somebody else was in the hallway, which got his attention. He turned from them and started shooting. And I quote, once he started shooting, it's like he kept going. It was so many gunshots after gunshots, she said. It felt like he was just shooting forever and then like it stopped, end quote. Another aspect about this people don't consider is that is trauma for that young girl. That is trauma for that child and anybody else involved in that situation. Could you imagine being a child in a classroom, somebody who you saw in there got up and walked out, and then whenever he came back, you just happened to be the person to almost let him in, but you paid attention before you did and noticed that he had a gun that could have literally killed everybody in that entire classroom. And then instead of that, because somebody else caught his attention, they were the ones who got shot. Like I said, that is trauma that she's probably going to have to deal with for the rest of her natural life. The other teacher who was unfortunately shot was a math teacher by the name of Richard Aspinwall. Now, his family and the people who knew them were basically saying that they were happy for all the people who were coming together and giving them support and condolences during this time. They all came together. They spoke very highly of him. Allegedly, this was the teacher who he had heard something going on outside of his classroom, took a step outside to see what in the world was going on, and he was unfortunately shot. His students grabbed him, pulled him back into the classroom, took the shirts off of their backs to try and put on his wounds to keep him alive. Unfortunately, he did not make it. A lot of people were commending the students for acting very fast, for trying to save their teacher, for, having the mindset, like I said, to be able to put the shirts and stuff on him to try and put pressure on the wounds to try and save his life. Like I said before, no child should have to be in that situation. No child should have to experience that. Again, that's trauma for those children who were in those positions. Now, this article brought attention to allegedly there was another school shooting that happened not too long ago right after this one in Baltimore. And people have got to remember when school is starting sometimes, when it is an election year, things get hectic. And unfortunately, one incident, I do believe, can lead to another one. One thing of violence inspires other people to create violence. Now, of course, there are already people out there who have the intentions to be violent. That's just the truth. But I do believe sometimes people will see one thing happening and it will spawn, if you will, another thing. That might be crazy to some people, but I do believe that plays a factor in some of this. On top of the things that we have going on already that we still haven't handled, we still haven't taken care of to prevent this stuff from happening. Speaking of which, it was allegedly, and I quote, deemed non-credible, some of these alleged social media threats that have been going on lately. And I understand they have to sift through these to make sure they are legitimate and that they aren't, wasting money and time on people who are just being stupid or trying to draw attention away from something to something else, so to speak. But unfortunately, this is what causes, I believe, also a delay in reaction time or a delay in help, trying to figure out if it's real or if it's not. And it's really bad because it's like, okay, well, what if they make a wrong decision and it was real, and now once again the school done got shot up because y'all didn't take it seriously? So I believe that there needs to be something done to be more careful with that. Now, they did say that if it was a specific threat, so to speak, quote, that they would investigate that and prosecute that. But once again, this is another layer, so to speak, of what I think causes people not to be able to get the help that they need when they need it. Now, let's talk about negligent parents, a lack of responsibility where it comes to parenting and parenthood for just a moment. Because allegedly this young man's father and I quote, faces 2 counts of second-degree murder, end quote, because of him allowing his son, knowing that he had issues, knowing that he had already allegedly made some threats and said some things that you don't say, and he allowed his son to have these weapons. Now, it is my understanding that this child had a very troubled upbringing. Allegedly, his mother was a criminal, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. If I'm not mistaken, he had 2 other siblings. The mom and the dad got a divorce. She took them too and then left him with the dad. And I'm assuming it's because of how troubled he was. But still, a lack of maternal involvement, that's not good. Y'all know that reduces the empathy and compassion that a child usually feels because they don't have that maternal connection anymore to nurture that. This man was probably doing what he could to raise him, but he still dropped the ball and failed because of what this young man did. Now, allegedly, like I said before, that kid already had some stuff going on and he knew it. He knew better than to give that kid weapons, and he did anyways. And I quote, central to the case against Gray will be an interaction the father and his son had with law enforcement more than a year before Wednesday's mass shooting. The teenager's access to the weapon used in the attack and what the father knew about the boy's mental state, experts told CNN, as a portrait of the teenager's tumultuous family life emerges. End quote. So like I said before, an entire year before all this happened, he saw the signs. Now, I'm trying to wrap my head around what he was thinking. I really am. Like, I really tried to go through the thought process. Part of me didn't really want to know what he was thinking. The only thing I can come up with is that he was trying to raise and take care of his son the best way he knew how. He probably knew, well, you know, I'm not going to say probably. I know he knew that kid had problems. And that's what makes me mad. Some of these parents up here, especially when it comes to these schools they're sending their children to, who they really need to be homeschooling, they be knowing their kids are demon spawn. They be knowing it. And they be sending them kids down into the schools to wreak havoc on the other kids and the teachers and the faculty and the staff. There needs to be a law put in place where if your child don't know how to act right, he stay in the house with you. And if you can't take care of him, then something about to happen. These parents be knowing their children are the spawn of Satan, that they have issues and will do absolutely nothing to fix it. Will act like, oh, not my little Billy, not my little Eve. Oh, yes, your children, yes. And then them not doing anything really translates to, oh, mom and dad is fine with what I'm doing. They're not going to stop me anyways, so I can keep doing it. And either these parents don't know or they're too incompetent to realize that. And then this kind of stuff happens. Now you've got parents who are mourning over their child because he couldn't keep his kid in check. Because he couldn't raise his child right. Because him and his ex-wife were too incompetent as adults to raise children in an environment where they didn't cause this kind of stuff. As I said before, this man knew his son wasn't right in the head. He was talking crazy. I guess the kid expressed an interest in guns. In his mind somewhere, I'm trying to wrap my head once again around it to understand how he could think this. He thought, I guess, he was doing the right thing by showing him these guns. Maybe he thought that he was trying to get him to cultivate some kind of positive interest. Oh, we could go hunting, son. This is how you use them. Maybe trying to like bond in a father-son way, in some kind of way to get him back from out of that mental state he was in. But again, you cannot be a parent to a child who has those kind of unhinged, ungodly, I dare say demonic thoughts, mindsets and patterns, talking about I'm going to let him have guns because he's interested in them, thinking that you're doing some kind of good thing. No, all he was thinking of, yeah, dad's letting me have the guns so he can go act out what he's been telling y'all he wanted to do this entire time. Like I said, maybe somewhere in his father's sick and twisted mind, he thought he was trying to help by showing him this stuff. By showing him guns, showing him, oh, well, you don't have to use them to shoot people with. Now, I can't say that because I wasn't a fly on the wall in the room when he was showing him the guns. But all I know is that was a horrendous decision, stupid even, to even allow him to have access to a gun, to even let him have one, to even trust him to not shoot somebody after everything that had happened. You don't put that kind of trust in a child, let alone even an adult. We don't trust adults like that. There are adults who are licensed to carry who actually don't have the mental capacity to be carrying a weapon. Why in the world would you trust a child just because that's your son? And now all he has done is taken that trust and thrown it in the trash. And he was sitting up there in those videos looking like he could not have cared less. Because, oh, well, dad saw me say XYZ and he still gave me the gun, so what was I supposed to do? That's what's going through his head. But for some reason, he thought it was a good idea to give that child some guns. That's why I don't feel sorry for him facing charges for what his child has done. I'm a firm believer in that if you don't raise the child that you chose to have in the right way to the point where they go out and cause fatalities, harm, trauma, misery, and sorrow to people around them, you deserve to be held accountable because you were their parent. You were supposed to raise them better than that. I'm 100% in agreement with him facing charges. Allegedly, this is only the second time in American history where this has happened. It should have happened before because, as I said before, when people face consequences, they'll think twice. So for all these people who think they should just be willy-nilly having guns around their kids or giving little Bobby guns even though he didn't talk about shooting up people, y'all can now see that y'all gonna get it too if y'all mess around and let y'all's kids access to these weapons to hurt people and shoot up their relatives. They need to do this every single time there's a school shooter. Every time one of these kids wants to pick up a gun that they didn't pay for, that don't belong to them, and go shoot up the schools, they need to arrest the parents of these kids. And I'm also going to bring up this, I'm going to also take it there, the demographic that these school shooters usually occur to be, the privilege that a lot of them come from. Once again, once they get the idea in their heads, the parents of these individuals, because usually it's these certain demographics, if you get my drift, that they don't shoot these kids. They'll shoot the other ones, but they don't shoot them usually. After all of the police officers and the authorities, the people who were responsible for protecting the kids and the people at the schools dropped the ball or they cowered their way out like in the Uvalde situation, but they don't shoot these kids. So once again, since they want to go down here and shoot up people without remorse, their mental state is out of here. Nobody wanted to do the right thing. Them and their parents need to be arrested, like I said before. Now, this child, and I quote, faces 4 counts of felony murder, could face life in prison. If convicted, he would not be eligible for the death penalty because he is under 18 years old, end quote. Although he will be charged, allegedly, as an adult under the Georgia law. Allegedly, he could end up facing additional charges because remember what I said, allegedly he shot 8 other children and a teacher. So those 9 other individuals whose injuries they don't know the extent of at the moment, once they launch their investigation and they find out said extent to those injuries, they could add on more charges, allegedly. Now, as for what his father is going to be charged with, and I quote, 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, 2 counts of second-degree murder, and 8 counts of cruelty to children. And those 8 counts allegedly being the 8 children who were injured, who possibly caught like a bullet, a stray bullet, or were grazed, could have caught shrapnel, etc. Once again, according to the affidavit, and I quote, he allegedly gave his son a firearm with knowledge he was a threat to himself and others, end quote. Also, according to this article, and I quote, the father could face a maximum prison sentence of 180 years, the judge said. End quote. Now, allegedly, the DA said that he was not trying to make an example out of this man with that 180-year possible sentence, that he was just trying to prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law for the crimes that he committed, that he led to with his negligence as a father, giving his child, who he knew had no business with weapons, a firearm. Now, I am of a firm belief that he should be making him out of an example, because once again, this will send a message to all the privileged individuals who think, oh, I can just let little Billy do whatever he wants to. Nobody can check me or my child. Or who wants to make negligent, dumb decisions. You and your child will be in the slammer, so to speak, if you want to do that. This should be sending a message to people. Because sometimes it's the only way they'll do right. Not because it's the right thing to do right. No, because they're afraid of a 180-year sentence if they mess up and let their child get access to them weapons. Now, this article was a little bit on the longer side, and I was trying to summarize the more important points. It also goes on to talk about the mothers and the fathers of the children, the young boys who were shot at that school, how they will no longer be able to hold their sons. The statements that they issued that absolutely breaks my heart because their children did not deserve this. The young 14-year-old by the name of Christian Angelo, his mother, Emma, said, he gave his father and me a hug. I will always carry that in my heart. He was a sweet boy with several dreams he wanted to pursue. He was only 14 years old. They took his whole life, his future, his time with us, she said. He didn't deserve this. He didn't deserve to die like this. Angelo's mother told Univision, I miss him. For me, this is like, I wish it was a dream. She also went on to say that she moved her and her family from California to Georgia in search of, and I quote, better and safer schools, end quote, only basically to find the same thing where she went to, which is sad. Could you imagine that, trying to move with your child to somewhere you thought was safer, only to encounter the same thing that you were getting away from, and the worst possible scenario to have happen? Like I said, my heart goes out to the mothers and the fathers, the sisters, the brothers, the children of these people who are gone now because of this situation. Like I said before, this article continues to speak on the life and the people who were taken too soon by this situation. Students, teachers, parents, sons, daughters, sisters, and brothers who were speaking on behalf of these people, saying that they did not deserve this, that they love them very much. Once again, people need to see this. It needs to be seen. We cannot continue to bury our heads in the sand. Christian's sister came out and offered her words, saying that he was a very good kid. He was very sweet, that he did not deserve this. This young girl, who is his older sister, should not have had to come out onto the news network to talk about how her brother was taken from her. There is allegedly a GoFundMe, according to this article, for that young child, in case anybody wanted to know. The other 14-year-old young victim, by the name of Mason Shimmerhorn, and I quote, was remembered by family friends as a loving soul and a creative kid. He was the sweetest, most loving soul with the biggest smile and will be missed dearly, a family friend wrote in a GoFundMe campaign for his family, end quote. So allegedly there is also a GoFundMe for him. And for anybody that says, oh, why didn't the family have the money? Who anticipates their 14-year-old child getting shot to death? Nobody. And even if they had been stashing away something, sometimes people still need help. As I mentioned before, there's a little bit more to this article that goes a little bit into, if I'm not mistaken, and if I've ascertained it correctly, why the father was getting those 2 counts. A little bit more into the legal jargon, if you will, the legal details of it all, if I'm not mistaken. Now, I want to move on to a post that I saw on Twitter not too long ago. Allegedly, there were some rumors going around stating that the mother had called the school, letting them know, which, if I'm not mistaken, he was only 3 days into going to the school, y'all, allegedly, that the child was having some issues. And I don't know if it was the rumors or if it was the mother basically saying that was her way of getting the accountability off of her and saying that, oh, well, I tried to warn y'all. It was no longer my fault anymore. It's the fault of the people who didn't know that he even had the guns to begin with. And I thought that was absolutely absurd. But let me read for you this post. And I quote, a 14-year-old school shooter had a history of mental health issues and challenging behavior, criminal mom, abusive parents, 4 CPS calls, an FBI inquiry, and a dad who still bought him a gun, yet a black school counselor at a school he attended for less than 3 days is at fault. Now, I have to say allegedly. I can't confirm any of this information, but we're also not going to act like it's not legitimate and very on brand with America and the American raggedy school system. Every time one of these kids do something, they always find a way to blame the teachers, the staff, the faculty, the counselors. They never want to blame the source, which is their raggedy parents. This young lady goes on to inform us all the common sense truth, and I quote, I need y'all to understand that calling a school and saying my child has extreme behavior, but not notifying the school he has access to guns does not automatically result in an immediate lockdown. I taught in public school. I've been trained in school safety protocols for years. The admin or counselors would locate the child to see if they're in a crisis and need de-escalation based on the extreme behavior warning. If he wasn't a threat to himself or others prior to the shooting that morning, there wouldn't have been a lockdown, even if his mom called. At the very least, until they located him. You do not want a lockdown where your students are barricaded in a classroom with a potentially volatile child that makes the kids trapped in place his targets even without a gun. For kids in crisis, they leave the room or the class leaves. This takes me back to the young girl, remember, who I talked about that said he left the room and tried to come back in after taking the gun out? If they would have called down there and said, oh, he's a problem, and they would have skipped protocols and locked that boy in the room with those kids, all of them probably would have been gone. That's why people have to think. That's why we have protocols put in place, and we need more to ensure the safety of children in this scenario, in these kind of situations, and the teachers as well. That young lady from Twitter goes on to say, saying there's an extreme emergency, find and check on my son, but no mention of his access to weapons wouldn't result in a lockdown. A lot of y'all are pointing the blame, not knowing school safety protocols on the school staff side of things. Use your brains. Then she posted some things that talked about the aunt of the child and the mother concerning the supposed call that she made to the school, allegedly 30 minutes before he did what he did. And I quote, this comes as allegations by the accused shooter's aunt raised new questions about whether Colt Gray's mother warned school officials of an extreme emergency about 30 minutes before the gunfire on Wednesday. Allegedly, that boy's aunt, as it says, and I quote, confirmed to ABC News that his mother called a school counselor, and I quote, on Wednesday morning, telling school officials to find her son and check on him immediately. This news was first reported by the Washington Post, end quote. So like I said, allegedly, according to the aunt, the mother called down there to the school and vaguely, if you ask me, told them that her son was in an emergency situation. Why she didn't tell them people that he had access to guns, I'll never understand that. Now, some people were saying because he wasn't living in a house with her, maybe she didn't know. But to blame anybody except for his parents, it's just wrong. Because again, how are those people supposed to know that that child had them guns in there? How? Now, somebody on Twitter did propose that maybe he was being bullied. He had only been at the school that he was shooting up, that he'd shot up, 3 days. But they proposed maybe he got bullied. But then that same young lady came back and said, no, he was at a previous school. He was already making threats of shooting somebody. And this was allegedly a year ago, which she explains all in this post. And I quote, they got evicted from their house and he transferred to the new school because his new house was only a few minutes away. This all started when he threatened to shoot up the other school and the FBI stepped in last year. He wanted to take lives. It didn't matter who, end quote. So as she said, it wasn't about the children at the school, the teachers, the faculty, the counselors. It wasn't about anything that they did or didn't do. It was about him and his negligent parents and our negligent system. Another person confirmed this in the comments by saying, and I quote, the truth is heartbreaking. The shooter's transfer to the new school was a result of his family's eviction, but the disturbing behavior began long before that. A year ago, he threatened to shoot up his previous school, prompting an FBI intervention. It's clear that he had a desire to harm others, and the target was never specific. It was a tragic inevitability waiting to happen. This wasn't a case of bullying or social conflicts, but a deeply troubled individual with access to firearms and a history of violent intentions. May we learn from this tragedy and work towards preventing such senseless acts in the future, end quote. Once again, there are even more tweets basically backing up how none of these people knew what was going on. The mother calling down there allegedly and saying, oh, something's wrong with my child was not enough information for those people to know that he had a gun on him. None of those people could have guessed that he would have been the kind of problem that he turned out to be that day. It's nobody's fault once again, except for the negligent parents, the parental negligence exercised by his father and our raggedy system, as I said before, because once again, why wasn't this child in a facility? The moment he started making threats concerning the other school, you don't just let that go. You don't just let children walk away who do stuff like that. I don't care what anybody says. He should have been somewhere locked up in a facility to keep him from hurting other people. Because they like to say, oh, he was a danger to himself and others. No, he was a danger to others. He didn't shoot himself. He shot other people. They should have had him somewhere to keep him from harming other people after the first time he started talking crazy. The fact that the authorities did not do anything to try and solve this situation before it happened, knowing what this child was capable of, knowing what he had already said, the threats he had already made, I can see why the pro-gun people feel like it's a setup, feel like they allow these children to do these things so that they can have a reason to ban guns altogether. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I can understand why they're saying these things. Even though I don't like guns, I try to respect people's right to bear arms because the Constitution gave us those rights. Even though I don't like firearms, I don't like guns, I can still extend grace, mercy, and understanding to people who do, and why they feel the way that they feel when we have authorities who can locate people and nip these situations in the bud, but they don't. They drop the ball constantly. Now, on the other hand, what nobody wants to hear immediately coming out of the mouths of these pro-gun people right after their children have been shot, their mothers, their fathers, is, oh, don't take our guns away. You just want to take our guns away. Nobody wants to hear that after a tragedy like this has just happened. These people can't even hold their sons anymore. Can't watch them grow up, graduate, go down the aisle, get married, have grandchildren. These people's children are traumatized watching their teachers getting shot up. Nobody wants to hear right off the rip, you're taking our guns away. You're trying to take our guns away. Nobody wants to hear that. We can understand if you say, okay, reasonably, first of all, let's be respectful and humane, decent. We're so sorry. Condolences to the people who lost people to this senseless gun violence. We support guns, but we don't support them being used for this. We don't support negligence, parental negligence, allowing people who don't need them to have guns. This was wrong. This should not have happened. It's sad we can't have nice things in this country because people abuse their rights. And then you go on in a separate conversation later to say, we believe that this is a plot to ban guns because they could have done something. But again, to say you're trying to take the guns right after this happens, it's wrong. It's inhumane. It's disgusting. And it also screams a lack of empathy. Some people really only care about their firearms. They don't care. And even with their own children, sometimes I really doubt some of these people would care. That's how much they're in love with these weapons. It's sad. Once again, there's nothing wrong with loving your child. You should love your child, but don't coddle them. Don't coddle them in their wrong. And don't overlook the red flags that they show. You have to be man or woman enough as a parent to say, if my child is going to be out here being a detriment to other people, then I have to do what I have to do as a parent to make sure that doesn't happen. And I do the opposite of that and empower them to go out and do something crazy. I really want y'all to think about that for a moment. This man really went out here and was negligent and did some goofy behind things, made some goofy behind decisions concerning his own child. All for his child to make him look bad and turn around and get them both sitting in a jail cell. Both looking at some serious hard time. Y'all just think about that before, once again, you overlook your children's red flags or you coddle them once again and they're wrong instead of putting your foot down and properly disciplining them. But anyways, y'all let me know what y'all think about all of this down in the comments below respectfully. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Y'all all have a very blessed, beautiful, and safe day.